Have you found yourself facing a really harsh inner critic anytime you listen back to a recording of yourself singing, or holding back your full sound because you're too worried about what it sounds like? Maybe you're unsure of what it's even supposed to sound like. Well, in today's episode, I talk about what to do instead of the worry and the self-judgment, both when you are actively singing and when you're listening back to a recording of yourself singing. So join me inside to release this inner critic and move past this roadblock that is keeping you from finding freedom and flow in singing. Welcome to Reawaken Your Voice. I'm Lainey Crawford, holistic voice coach, singer, song weaver. I believe the song in your heart holds medicine for yourself and for the world. And yet too often, something happens along the way. We shut down our voice and our song goes unsung. Whether you stopped singing years ago or have always harbored an unrealized dream to start, if you're ready to finally give voice to those unsung songs in your heart, then take my hand as I guide you to free yourself from the inner critic, reignite your creativity, find your courage, sing with confidence, and reawaken those dormant parts of yourself aching for a revival. So dust off your songbooks, tune up your guitar, bust out your singing bowls, your shakers, your drum. Actually, all you really need is your voice, your breath, open ears, and an open heart. Let's play. I've heard from so many women I've worked with that you hate the way you sound on recordings. You're worried about what it sounds like when you're actively singing, too. Maybe you're not sure what your voice is supposed to sound like or how to judge the quality of your vocal tone. So you're left wondering, is it even any good? You're too worried about how it sounds, and you're trying not to judge yourself when you hear your own voice, but then there it is, once again, every time. The constant internal criticism. The insecurities are popping up, and you're doubting your abilities once again. All of this translates to holding back from releasing the fullness of your sound. I know what this feels like. And yes, it does show up again and again. But here are two things that I've learned over the years, and I use them anytime I notice it creep up again. It'll always try to weasel its way back in, that inner critic. So the trick is to develop an awareness around it and learn to see it for what it is, and then come back to these two things. Now I'll share with you a couple examples of how this shows up for me, both recently and in the more distant past. Because like I said, it comes back again and again, and it's just a matter of learning how to see it for what it is and shift your approach to the reaction, what you do about it when you hear this inner critic pop up. So recently I've been working on a project where I'm recording some of my songs, and what I've been working on improving in this process is actually my ability to sing into a microphone. I know, it's a whole thing. You'd think I would have refined this skill by now, but Actually, I've gone most of my vocal career without using a microphone. In the classical world, in opera, you kind of learn how to be your own microphone and to amplify your sound through the body's resonance chambers. And so this is, a really different thing for me. Not that I've never used a microphone, but or done recordings like this, but it's something that I'm intentionally trying to get better at. So after a session, I had a recording of 2 or 3 songs, and I wanted to listen back to see how it all went, get a feel for it, see what I needed to work on. But at first, I avoided listening altogether. See, we're not that different, you and I. And so once I got over that, I decided to listen. And I also decided after listening that I should redo the whole thing and delete any trace of this recording's existence. But then, of course, I realized, no, this is a learning experience, and I'm going to use it to improve. There were some really beautiful moments in there, and then there were some moments to learn from and grow from. So I took a step back. I detached from it so that I could assess from a neutral perspective. And by doing this, I could hear what I needed to shift in order to sing better into the microphone, like in order to work with the microphone better. I could hear it as I listened back intentionally. And that's going to make such a huge difference the next time I go back into the recording studio. So that was an exciting victory. Now, another example of this judgment coming up for me is when I was doing competitions. I was doing a lot of vocal competitions and auditions at a certain point in my musical career. And when I would go to these competitions and these auditions, every venue, every space, every room was different. So the acoustics were different. And when I showed up to a new space, I couldn't rely on how it sounded in the moment. Like the feedback that I was getting from the room, I couldn't rely on that. I had to go based on how it felt in my body and lean on my muscle memory that I had developed through practice. So I would literally be standing in front of judges, literal judges, judging my sound. That's what they were there for. That's why I was there. I wanted them to judge me. It sounds so funny. But through doing these competitions, I would receive written and spoken feedback, depending on the context. Sometimes it would be written, and sometimes they would tell me right after my performance, one by one. But then I used that feedback to improve, to get better. Yeah, I won some. I placed in some. I didn't place it all in others. This was a practice of improving my craft, refining my technique, and getting better at what I loved to do. So I share these examples with you so you can see that, yes, this is normal. Your inner critic will come through and be a really harsh judge. But the trick is to develop an awareness around it and see it for what it is and come back to these 2 things. So, number 1, when singing, focus on how it feels, not how it sounds. So this is something I learned how to do when performing in all these different venues where the acoustics and the feedback from those acoustics was all different. So if I was listening to how it sounded, it wouldn't be an accurate representation of what it actually was. Because when you worry about how it sounds while singing, you're only able to judge from inside of the instrument itself. So you cannot separate yourself from your voice in the moment. Like, it's part of you, it's inside of you. So it's going to sound different from different perspectives within the same room. And it's going to sound different in different rooms, in different spaces and venues and setups. So you're not getting an accurate representation of the sound anyway. Like, no one else is hearing it from inside of you. Does that make sense? If you want to experience this difference in sound, try putting books up to your ears as an experiment. So what I mean is, take 2 books and put one edge just in front of each ear and angle them out like a loudspeaker megaphone thing. If you can imagine that shape, you're directing the books like from just in front of your ears, just behind your cheeks, and then angling it out at like a 45-degree angle. And sing with those books in place and see what it sounds like. It sounds very different. And that's kind of the closest you can get to getting outside of yourself. And this is why feeling is so important, because it sounds different from different perspectives. And also, when you worry about how it sounds, you're analyzing from the head, and that blocks you from getting into and opening up and singing from the heart. Feeling the physical sensations, the vibrations of the sound moving through your body, that leads us deeper into the heart. And it helps us gather our energy to direct it into the music in the form of emotion. So when you are singing, focus on how it feels in your body, not how it sounds. Does it feel painful? Do you feel tension? Well, then there's something that needs to be released or realigned, or the placement needs to shift, or the breath needs to move differently. Does it feel joyful? Do you feel at ease? Well, that's a sure sign that there's alignment there. And you're relaxing into the tone really beautifully. So focus on how it feels, not on how it sounds. Number 2, when listening back to a recording, practice discernment. Discerning between constructive criticism in pursuit of excellence versus destructive criticism in pursuit of perfection. There's a huge difference. Discerning between the voice of the inner critic and the voice of your inner wisdom, the voice of truth, objective truth. What is the tone of this inner voice? Is it cruel? Is it mean? Is it cold? Or is it loving and warm and uplifting? Practice discernment between truth and lies. And this is a big one. This is one that I prayed for a long time ago. Eyes to see and ears to hear. Discernment between truth and lies. That will help you in all areas of life. But the bottom line is, are you tearing yourself apart? Or are you actively seeking to improve, to learn, to grow, to develop? When I hear this voice pop up, sometimes I think, this voice of the inner critic, sometimes I think, would I say that to a student? Would I say that to my son? Would I say that to another person in general? Then why am I saying it to myself? Why would it be okay to talk to myself that way if I would never even think about talking to someone else that way? We can be so mean to ourselves because there's no accountability. It's just us alone with our thoughts. So discern which one it is. Which one is it? Is it constructive or destructive? And how do you discern that? Well, look at the fruit. Does it lead you to work on building yourself up? Or does it lead you into a pile of rubble without a voice? So when you're recording and listening back, close your eyes and incorporate a little bit of number 1, which is feeling how it sounds. You can hear how it feels. Notice tension sounds tense. And you feel tense in your body when listening. And notice how a relaxed feeling sounds like ease. Listen for what it feels like in the body. And when you do this from a neutral perspective, it holds such valuable feedback. This is such a great tool that so often we avoid because of this inner critic coming in to judge. But if we can learn to detach ourselves and listen back to a recording with discernment, it can be such a valuable tool to improve, to get better, to hone your craft. Look at it as data. When you're listening back, you look at it as information, data. It doesn't have to mean something about you personally. This is an objective assessment to refine your vocal technique, determine what's working and what isn't, and move forward intentionally with that information to grow and improve. Because keep in mind that as you practice and develop your instrument, you're also honing your ear, you're training your ear, so you will get better at discernment over time. So just to summarize, these are 2 things to remember. When you find yourself judging your sound really harshly, number 1, when you're singing, actively singing, focus on how it feels in your body. Number 2, when listening back to a recording, practice discernment. discernment between the voice of the inner critic and the voice of inner wisdom. Which voice do you want singing through you? Do you want the voice of the inner critic singing through you? Or do you want the voice of your inner wisdom singing through you? So here's my challenge to you. Record yourself singing something that's been on your heart. Let it be easy. Don't overthink it. But while singing and recording, focus on how it feels in your body. Then listen back to the recording and practice discernment. Notice how the feeling compares to when you were singing versus when you're listening. And then find something positive, something you like about your voice, and find something you'd like to improve. Use the feeling, the sensation of the sound in your body when listening back to it. Use that feeling to guide you towards adjusting your technique, your approach, your placement, your breathing, whatever it is. This is practicing a growth mindset. Use it in your next practice session to improve, to get better. Because remember, it is a journey. Keep going. Hey friend, thank you so much for listening. If this episode unlocked something in you or moved you in some way, I'd be so grateful if you'd leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're streaming this, and share this episode with a friend who's been praying for a vocal breakthrough. Until we meet again, keep nurturing that song in your heart. Lots of love.